Sure, I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist. I am board certified in forensic psychology. I am the president-elect of the trauma division of the American Psychological Association. And I evaluated Amber Heard over 6 visits for approximately 29 hours.
Okay. And why are you here today?
But she's not a client.
To offer rebuttal testimony to Shannon Curry's testimony of yesterday.
She really hates Dr. Curry.
Dr. Curry said you used improper methods. Would you agree with that?
No, I would not.
Why? Please explain.
As I testified to you all several weeks ago, I used a standard forensic procedure that is well established in our field. It is a multi-method, multi-hypothesis-driven procedure where you're looking at a variety of different details and tests and external data to arrive at an opinion, and you're looking at the consistency across that data. There are 3 sort of sets of tests that we use as forensic psychologists, and I think that's where it seems that Dr. Curry seems confused. We have forensic assessment instruments. Those are instruments that are very neatly tied to a legal criteria. Those are most notably done in a criminal court for competency. If someone has competency to stand trial, we have very clear measures that can track that legal criteria. The next level are forensically relevant instruments. And those instruments are not linked to a specific legal criteria, but they do have information that's germane to that finding. And that can be an example of a risk assessment measure and a malingering measure. So the malingering measure that I utilized was the MFAST, and that was the only malingering measure in this case. The third category are clinical assessment instruments, and those are instruments that are validated and well-researched and used in the clinical realm as we understand people's symptomatology and diagnostic and functional capacities. Those are things like the MMPI, the PAI, the CAPS, the TSI, because they are clinically relevant and they still give us very valuable information to individuals who are involved in a court case. And the reason that we do that and we use these clinical measures is because the majority of the people that we see are in a clinical realm. They're not in a courtroom. So they're well-validated and well-researched methods. What we also do is use very different types of tests within that category. We use some checklists, some face-valid checklists. We use some tests that are those broadband personality inventories. We use structured clinical interviews, and then we look for the consistency across those data points. And when we use different types of tests, it gives us information about the individual, how they go about these tests in these different modalities.
Now, Dr. Curry seemed to suggest that Amber Heard tested the most extreme category in all of these different tests. Is that accurate?
The most extreme. She didn't say that.
Overruled.
She didn't say that.
That is not accurate. They were not on the checklist. I mean, people sometimes do. They go, all the time, this happens to me all the time, frequently. And that is not how she endorsed these tests. She endorsed them in a very moderate way, in a very nuanced way, describing her symptoms that I determined was accurate and reliable.
Dr. Curry also suggested that Amber Heard was tested very, very high, 98th percentile, I think, on malingering and feigning. Could you speak to that, please?
Sure. So, I mean, she said a lot of things, so let's go through those tests. The first was the PAI, and that's that other broadband psychological
Objection,
measure.
Non-responsive.
I think it's very responsive.
Okay.
Could you tell the jury
down the
about
time.
the PAI test that Dr. Curry addressed?
Yes.
Is he there? He's ready.
So that's the broadband measure that has validity scales built into it that gives us indications about how the individual goes about the test. I told you last time that there was no evidence of malingering or exaggeration or feigning on that test. What Dr. Curry was talking about was this tendency to put your best foot forward to minimize faults on this PAI.
Of course.
That scale was right at the cusp. And then there are 2 other measures that we look at that to say, you know, is this enough for an elevation for me to consider that as a serious response distortion, of which Dr. Curry was saying, and it was not. What was relevant on this test was there were elevations on anxiety, on affective anxiety, meaning anxiety, tension, worry, on traumatic stress, on hyperactivity, and on affective instability. Those were the 4 scales that were elevated on this test. The borderline scale was not elevated on this test. And this test...
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Yes.
I'm so, like, I am just so ready to see that guy absolutely fucking, like, destroy her. Because I am so sick of seeing that bitch. I am. For her to go up there and fucking categorize all violence with genders. I hate this bitch. I want her off the screen. And she's just like, and I'm not sorry. Like, I don't call people that all the time. But with her, absolutely. Fucking absolutely. She's an absolute piece of shit. And there's no way. She's just going up there. The only reason she's going up there is because she is trying to save her credibility because she got made to look like a fucking clown. That's what it is. That's why she's up there. She's not even up there for Amber. She's up there for herself because everybody that's out there, everybody in the whole world saw how much of an obvious fucking fraud she is. And that's why she's not even talking about Amber. She's talking about how she administered her tests. She shouldn't even be here.
So, Dr. Curry, let's move to the TSI-2. Dr. Curry testified about your findings on that. Did you agree with her testimony yesterday?
No, again...
Please describe why. Explain why.
What Dr. Curry went back to, which is this 98th percentile, which I told you in the manual. All you have to do is read the manual. Mm-hmm. It says specifically that we do not use the percentile ranks for this test. That indicates to me that, you know, Dr. Curry does not know the psychometric properties of this test, and then she then is therefore not qualified to interpret it. That score, the one that's elevated, which she's talking about, that percentile rank, has a raw score. Amber's raw score is a 10. The cutoff score is a 15. She's nowhere near that level of exaggerated symptoms where I can't further look at that test. Secondly, there are 3 scales out of about, maybe there's about 20, a little more on the TSI that were elevated. Intrusive experiences, that's when thoughts and memories of the trauma come into your mind when you don't want them. Defensive avoidance, sort of behavioral ways that we try to push out those memories and not think about them. And then relational avoidance, a way of having difficulty in interpersonal relationships. Those are all trauma-based symptoms, and those were elevated on this test.
Thank you. Dr. Hughes, the MFAS, Dr. Curry addressed that as well and had criticisms for your interpretations. Do you agree with that?
No.
Please explain to the jury.
So the MFAS, as I told you last time, is a measure of malingering. It's the only measure of malingering that was done in this case. Dr. Curry did not independently administer measure malingering, and there are other ones that she could have done to augment her evaluation. And she kept saying something that MFAS is not for
1 hour, by the way.
PTSD. That's wrong on a couple of levels. People who are going to malinger and feign don't only feign one diagnosis. They sometimes talk about all different symptoms that they have, and they exaggerate and they make themselves seem much worse than they are. So when you're doing an evaluation, you're giving a malingering measure to get a sense of how this person is responding to this evaluation. Now, what you do is you take those 3 tests that I talked to you about, the PAI, the TSI, and the MFAS, all with valid validity scales, you have greater confidence in your results. And that is in the literature, and that's literature that Dr. Curry cited in her report. That bolsters the methodology that I used. That in the study that had the PAI, the MFAS, and the TSI in the title of detecting feigned from bona fide PTSD.
It's got nothing to do with Amber.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Curry also talked about the danger
literally nothing to do with
and
her.
Suggested that you had inappropriately interpreted that. Do you agree?
That's also incorrect.
Please describe for the jury.
Which I told you last time, the danger assessment scale has statistically validated risk factors for serious or lethal domestic violence. Those risk factors exist whether we go forward, we're sitting with someone in an acute setting and assessing them right now, or if we look backward and we look retrospectively about what factors may have been present in a case that indicated severity. That instrument is used in what we call, there's called domestic fatality review boards. Those are boards after somebody has been killed, a homicide has occurred in a domestic situation. They look at these risk factors to see what was there and what could be done.
Right. Dr. Curry also criticized your administering of the CAPS-5. Do you agree with her criticisms?
I do not.
Okay, of course not.
So the CAPS-5, as you all have heard multiple times, is a structured clinical interview in determining PTSD according to DSM-5 criteria.
Okay.
On this measure, Amber Heard scored in a moderate range. She did not over-exaggerate on this test. She could have said no, mild, moderate, severe, and extreme. All of hers were either 2s or 1s or 0s, not above that. So she's scoring in the moderate range, which still has functional impairments. I mean, we don't want someone to be having moderate PTSD, but that's not an exaggerated profile or an exaggerated response style of someone who's answering an instrument.
And the last of these Dr. Curry referred to was the PCL-5.
So that means she doesn't have PTSD?
Do you agree
like,
with her criticisms of your administration and interpretation of that?
Wait, what?
No, so the PCL-5 is a checklist of symptoms of PTSD. It is, as she said, it is a face valid instrument. It means it's very clear about how you can endorse this. But what the person has to do is say, how disturbed am I by these symptoms? And when you have face valid measures with these other measures that have the built-in sort of ability scales, you're sort of controlling for that response bias error. You're controlling for that individual to sort of over-exaggerate. But then what you do with that test, because this is, we're not just administering them like robots, is you go and you do a clinical assessment. And that's what I did.
Right.
I took what she wrote, what she endorsed on that test in January of 2021, and I did a clinical assessment of those symptoms to see if they meet criteria for PTSD. That is something we do clinically, and I do in my office all the time. And yes, she did meet PTSD from that in January 2021.
But
Thank you.
They said that
Dr. Curry said you misinterpreted her test results. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree that I agree that I interpreted them, that she misinterpreted them.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I said that before.
Okay.
My stance on the MMPI and how she interpreted it.
That's real cute.
Is, I believe wrong, and I think most.
Objection, Your Honor.
All right.
That's the issue we just addressed.
All right. I don't.
If you want to approach.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. All right. So yeah, anyway, well then what about the fact that so whenever she tested her for PTSD, what Dr. Curry said is that she didn't test and control for the PTSD, being an outcome or a factor of her experiences with Johnny Depp or her experiences as a kid. So what Dr. Curry said is she should have done 2 tests. So the PTSD assessment could still be accurate, but not according to what happened with Johnny.
Dr. Curry also testified that a victim of PTSD has to effectively be prone and unable to function at all. Would you agree with that?
Nobody said that.
Objection misstates the evidence.
She said they couldn't hike, they couldn't move, they couldn't function in any way, shape, or form.
Objection.
Thank you.
No, that is not correct. That is often actually a myth and misconception about individuals who were struggling with PTSD or trauma-based disorders, and I'm often called to answer that and speak to that. People who are struggling with trauma and PTSD are very strong, courageous, resilient people, even though that they're struggling. They get up, they have to go to work and drop their kid off at school and go to the market, even though they're struggling with these symptoms. So I often talk about it as this sort of walking around with a 50-pound bag of flour on their backs, just sort of trying to get through the day, where sometimes that button's going to press play and the trauma's going to start activating in their head, and then they're going to be having to think about it and have startle and have physiological reactions until they can find a way to hit that pause and shut it off again. So they still have, impairments in other ways, but they go about their lives. They're not
Everything she's
totally
saying could be
debilitated.
accurate right now.
If you have someone
way.
in that high range, the highest score is an 80
completely
on the
irrelevant.
CAPS. Ms. Heard had a 28. If you have someone in the higher range, we have seen people who are, severely disabled because of it, but that's not the norm of people who have this moderate PTSD.
I'll explain why.
And did you find
whenever I get a
functional
chance.
impairment with Amber?
Yes, I did.
Now, Dr. Curry also said that it is not within the scope of a psychologist to evaluate domestic violence. Do you agree with that?
Of course, I don't agree with that. This is what I do for a living, day in, day out, for 25 years. We are specifically trained to understand the profound impact that trauma has on people's lives. That's what we do in the trauma division of the American Psychological Association. We disseminate that knowledge. And domestic violence is one of those profound traumas. Domestic violence is part of state licensing boards, that you can't get licensed in some states unless you take training on domestic violence. You can't renew your license unless you get training on domestic violence. So people who have, specialized training in this area, it is, beholden upon them to accurately assess for intimate partner violence and sexual violence. And it's more important to assess for the sort of scientific understanding of what domestic violence is. So you have to assess for the physical violence, the psychological violence, the surveillance, the economic, the emotional abuse,
Clock
and
is ticking.
the sexual violence. That is not gratuitous. That is
Objection.
understanding.
Narrative.
All right. Next question.
It's not a narrative. This is a book.
Now, Dr. Curry suggested that you made a determination just based on personal opinion and just on checklists and a couple of tests that you misinterpreted. Would you agree with that?
I vehemently disagree with that. As I stated to you, over 29 hours and 12 psychological tests and reviewing a slew of documents in this case, most importantly, therapy records and interviews, collateral interviews with therapists. Using all that data, that is what a solid forensic methodological exam looks like. And then I made my conclusions based on my clinical education, knowledge, and training to come up with a professional expert opinion.
Professional expert opinion.
And just to remind,
Relying on
to make sure
authority.
we're reminded here, you were qualified in this court, in this case, as an expert in forensic psychology, specifically in domestic violence and in no, I just lost it. And
It's
in violence,
contagious.
correct? Intimate and in trauma, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the record.
Yeah, if you want to ask the question again.
Yeah, it's contagious.
Yeah, I probably should do that. You were qualified. I got to find my note. You were qualified as an expert in forensic psychology with a specialty in domestic violence and in trauma, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that was in this case?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, do you still hold the same opinions you did that you gave the jury earlier?
Yes, I do.
And do you still hold them within a reasonable degree of psychological probability and certainty?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor, but can we approach quickly?
Sure.
Oh, boy. So it's just like... the entire thing is fundamentally flawed because all of the entire thing was like pretty much hinged on the diagnosis of PTSD, right? But the diagnosis of PTSD was done without a control for the PTSD being an outcome of her childhood experiences. So everything else that's built off of that foundation is fundamentally flawed. PTSD. Well, listen, I got verbal dyslexia. You're gonna have to get used to it. That's all there is to it. So yeah, it's just it makes no fucking sense. Yeah, and on top of that, her being an expert in domestic violence does not necessarily mean that she is an expert at determining if domestic violence occurred. She is only an expert in the context of treating people who say they have experienced it, not determining its authenticity. Like, it's intentionally misleading. All right, here we go. Tribal extinction for 5 steps. Here we go.
Good morning, Dr. Hughes.
Good morning, Mr. Dennison.
The last time you were here, I believed that you testified that you had diagnosed Ms. Heard with PTSD before you gave the gold standard CAPS-5 test.
That's correct.
Wow.
And
That's how good she is.
diagnosis is actually reflected in the first of the disclosures you put forward in this case.
I believe the first disclosure was February 2021, and at that point I had done 11 psychological tests. That's correct.
Right. And Your disclosure reads, Ms. Heard's responses on the PCL-5 support a DSM-5 diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder with an etiology of intimate partner violence she experienced by a former partner. Remember writing that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just testified that you need to read the manual, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-oh. It's going to be how...
Can we put up 1311 as a demonstrative?
It's about how she didn't fill everything out. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, remember that? How she didn't fill out anything? It's in the manual. Yep, let's go. I think that this
Any
woman...
objection to
I don't know
1311?
what it is, Your Honor.
All right, if you want to lay
We
it.
approach.
I think that the reason why this woman hates Dr. Curry, I actually don't think that it has anything to do with the fact that, like, Dr. Curry said her testimony was wrong or anything like that. I think the only reason why she's so upset about this and so pressed about it is because the judge accidentally called her Dr. Curry twice. I think this is just a complete fucking ego thing. Remember that? Yeah, do you remember that? That's why she's there. And, yeah, that's what it is. It's got nothing to do with this fucking case. Nothing about not the judge, the lawyer. Elaine did it too. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I thought that... Oh, so it was the judge once and then her afterwards. Okay. Oh, my God. I thought the judge said it once, then Elaine said it once. Here we go.
I don't see this in my document either.
They're getting the right
Elaine
one.
said it twice.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Let's use 1312.
1312, okay. And that, any objection to that demonstrative?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, 1312 can be published to the jury.
Dr. Hughes, do you recognize what the National Center for...
Get out the book.
What it is?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And they publish
Uh-oh.
the PTSD checklist for DSM-5,
That's correct.
that what we've been calling the PCL-5.
Correct.
All right. And do you, are you familiar with the document that's on your screen?
Yes.
All right. What is it?
It's the instruction manual to how to administer the PCL-5.
All right. Yep. That's what it seems like.
I'd like to move for the admission of 1312.
Any objection to 1312 coming into evidence? All right, 1312 in evidence.
All right. Can we go to the second page? Can we blow up the second paragraph on the right?
That's the left. Yeah.
The PCL-5 should not be used as a standalone diagnostic tool. When considering a diagnosis, the clinician will still need to use clinical interviewing skills and a recommended structured interview, e.g., the CAPS-5, to determine a diagnosis, correct?
Okay.
That's what the manual says.
Right, and this manual
Okay.
also says that this is a screening instrument, so when you do the clinical interviewing, you absolutely can determine diagnosis
So
after
the answer is
somebody
yes. The manual says you
still
the
need to use
PCL-5
clinical interviewing skills, which I used.
Well, let me finish my question.
Uh-huh.
The PCL-5 should not be used as a standalone diagnostic tool, and they recommend using the CAPS-5 to determine a diagnosis, correct?
Oh, wow.
It does say that, yes.
Yeah, and you made your diagnosis before you did the CAPS-5.
I made my diagnosis doing clinical interviewing and 11 other psychological tests that supported diagnosis of PTSD and symptomatology consistent with PTSD.
Okay. You said that we should read the manual. Would you also agree with me that we need to read the directions on these tests?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, God. Okay, here we go. Yep.
Tom, can you pull up 1309?
Okay, all right.
Demonstrative?
That's my favorite thing, is where they ask a question that's obviously leading like that, they say, okay, and then they ask to pull up an evidence. That is my favorite part of this whole thing. Holy shit. All right, let's go.
Yes, sir.
What?
Thank you.
Let's go at this point. Yeah, he's going to make her probably read it. Okay.
Any objection of
Here we go.
1309 as a demonstrative?
May we approach?
Okay.
I bet, yeah. The okayed every witness? Yeah, exactly. Anti-wizard undefeated. Well, it's just that, like, I mean, especially with her, I mean, she's the easiest one to discredit. I feel like she's obviously just like a complete fucking clown, man. Like, she's on there explaining this stuff, and like, she didn't even fill out most of the forms and stuff like this that she had said. And then also, like, I find this to be very odd that the interpretations can be so wildly different. You know what I mean?
Doctor, do you recognize the demonstrative that's in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but I didn't put the red lines on that.
No, I did.
Yes, I know.
Okay. So this, what do you recognize this as?
I recognize that we previously discussed this, and I told you that I oriented Ms. Heard to a different time frame because she was already out of the relationship.
Okay, maybe we should back it up a little. This is the CTS-2 that you administered as part of this battery of tests that you indicate you you did in relationship to your diagnosis.
Right, this is the conflict tactic scale 2.
Okay.
And you'll agree with me that this
Wait, I thought she wasn't a client.
Specifically asks, in front of every single question, how often did this happen in the past year?
Correct, and I oriented
And
the
you
individual
know,
to not
I
limit
think
herself
it's
to the
correct.
last year to get an accurate assessment of the violence and abuse that she experienced in the relationship.
Intentionally do it wrong.
All right. I'll move to strike the last part of the answer. I'll strike the last part of the answer. Thank
Just
you.
move to strike. Okay.
Next question.
Yeah. And you know that at the time that you gave this test to Ms. Heard, she had been away from Mr. Depp for far longer than a year, correct?
Which is why I oriented her to a different
Yes or no,
time
ma'am?
frame in
Orienting
answering
her.
the questions.
Doctor, yes or no?
So, of course,
Okay, you knew she was gone for more than a year.
of course.
All right. Let's look at another one of these. You talked about the danger. I'm sorry.
It's so obvious,
You
man.
talked about the danger assessment test.
That's correct.
All right.
Smart. Who knows? It's like, for some people, she might think she's winning now.
What number is this?
You know what I mean? Yeah, maybe she thinks she's winning.
Plaintiff's 1310.
I mean, it could be. That could be it. So I can't believe I'm winning so hard.
1310 as a demonstrative. Okay. You publish to the jury.
Mm-hmm. Danger assessment.
Dr. Hughes, this is a blank form, but this is the danger assessment test that you also gave to Ms. Heard, correct?
Uh-huh.
I didn't give it to her. I filled it out based on the data that was provided to me.
Oh, so you asked her the questions and then you filled it in.
It was somewhat collaborative.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we blow up the second full paragraph? It says, using the calendar, please mark the approximate dates during the past year when you were abused by your partner or ex-partner. You didn't use any calendar, did you?
No.
I did not use a calendar because she was already out of the relationship. As I said, these are static risk factors, so they don't change. So I oriented her to the time of the relationship.
Ma'am, it's fair to say that this examination that you gave specifically indicates that you were supposed to look over the past year. And that's not the language?
No, that's one administration. People use this instrument for if you're in an acute situation in a relationship, trying to get a better assessment of the current behaviors. We can use it retrospectively, like I just stated, and in homicides and looking back about what are the serious risk factors that were in this relationship.
I didn't ask you about anything other than, don't the instructions limit this test to the previous year?
You can give this test not only on the previous year.
Asking you about the instructions.
But I'm telling you how the test is administered in clinical practice and in forensic practice.
And opposing counsel can come up and ask questions about it. I'm asking you about the instructions.
Yeah.
And the instructions say, look over the past year. And,
Yeah, on this, yes, that it says that.
and
She
you had
thought she
actual
could beat the
knowledge
Wizard
when you
Destroyer.
gave the test that Mr. Depp was gone way more than a year before this test.
She
That
thought
is
she could beat him.
All right, let's look at more instructions. Can we look at 1287,
audacity.
which is already in evidence?
Actually thought she could beat the Wizard. Or the Wizard Destroyer. Oh my god. Holy shit, man.
Dr. Hughes, you recognize this one too, right?
Yes,
All right, this is what everybody calls the CAPS 5.
correct.
All right, can we go to the first page? Let's blow up the instructions.
Okay. Let's see it.
Standard administration and scoring of the CAPS 5 are essential for producing reliable and valid scores and diagnostic decisions. Correct?
Correct.
And you know you have to do this in a standardized way because it is the first instruction, correct?
Correct.
Uh-huh.
Can we go to the next page?
Our career's literally over. Yeah,
Okay.
isn't it great?
That's good. This is a page on scoring, and we talked about this last time.
Yes.
You score these tests by frequency and intensity.
Correct.
And you'll remember that in every single instance that you were asked to fill in the blank about frequency, you failed to do so, correct?
That's not correct.
No.
Oh, you filled in any blank on this form with respect to frequency?
I filled in the frequency on the side of the caps where I am actually scoring the caps.
No, I asked
Where
you
it's
whether
relevant.
you filled in a single blank on this form with respect to frequency. Is the answer to that yes or no?
I don't know what you mean, a single blank.
All right, let's page.
She actually
Let's keep
thought
going.
she was going to get away.
All right.
She thought she was going to
we'll
get
stay
away.
This page for a second. This
Oh,
is the
no.
very first box you're asked to fill in as to, I think, a fairly fundamental question, right? What happened?
Yeah.
We talked about this before, Mr. Dennison. I had 88 pages of notes of what happened. It would have been redundant to put it there.
You know that you are obligated to produce this test in a way that other people can meaningfully review them. Yes?
The people in this
Yes.
case who are meaningfully reviewing them have my 88 pages of notes.
All right, but you chose to put absolutely nothing in the box, the standardized box, that said what happened.
Yeah.
You don't have to put it in the box if you have it somewhere else. It's
Because
not a.
this
if
is
it's
not a
a
standardized test.
Well, if it's not a research instrument that is used for research, if you're using it for a clinical diagnostic purpose, no, you don't. If you have that data elsewhere.
Okay, let's go another page or so.
Okay, yeah. So there we go. All right.
All right, let's go another one. All right, let's look at item 4B4. And I asked you filled in the blank about frequency. And there's a blank in many of these items that asks number of times.
Uh-huh.
You didn't fill a single one of them in, did you?
Right, because I filled them on the right side of the instrument where I am scoring it.
And that is the way that you believe that you followed the instructions of a standardized test.
Yes, correct.
No further questions.
All right, redirect.
Okay. Yep, there it is. Yeah, I had the correct answer. It just was on a different question, guys. That's all.
What do you mean by that? Static risk factors are risk factors that don't change.
She's
maybe,
not happy.
If you smoke cigarettes,
Yeah.
you may have a risk of lung cancer, right? That's a factor that doesn't change.
She's
You can
moving
look
her hands
forward if
around.
someone's smoking, you can
Oh,
look
yeah.
fast if someone's smoking. So these lethality risk factors are present whether you're evaluating them in the last year or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're trying to assess for trauma related to the interpersonal violence that we discussed, why is it important to get a time frame in which the relationship was in existence?
Well, you want to see the amount of trauma that the person experienced. The longer that they're in a relationship, you have more successive trauma. And one of the things that we know from the research is more trauma is not better. So the more successive traumas that you have, the greater likelihood that somebody's going to have psychological consequences and symptomatology as a result.
Okay.
And therefore, you need to get it within the relationship.
Objection leading.
And so how does that relate to needing to get the time frame in the relationship?
Well, you need to understand when you're trying to evaluate the impact of something, you have to understand what happened to the person, and that's sort of the core and the basis of trauma-informed care and of trauma diagnoses. You have to understand, the traumatic event and how it transpired and how it played out for that individual, so that you can better assess for the symptomatology that's falling from it.
You said you had 88 pages of notes. What were in your 88? And without going into the specifics, can you just describe what was included in the 88 pages of notes?
All right, let's see it.
In the 88 pages were many of the documented incidents of intimate partner
Objection, Your Honor.
She's just describing it. That came up. He said you didn't fill those in the boxes. She said it was in my 88 pages. I'm just saying what was in your 88 pages. I'm not asking her to give each of the specific events. She can describe the summary of it.
TikTok, let's go.
Can we come up?
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Look how mad she is, bro. Like, oh my God. And this guy, I feel like he's one of those people that the more annoyed and angry the people are around him, the happier he is. It's like the more pissed off the person is, he's like, yeah, let's go on up there again. Why don't we just go ahead and explain things? I don't know what's going on. Yep.
What is the difference between clinical scoring and clinical evaluation and research evaluation with respect to the CAPS-5 and the other tests?
When compound.
Sustained.
Your Honor, when it's compounded, it's because it might be confusing to the jury.
Good. Sustained. Next question.
Okay. Can you explain to the jury what the difference is between clinical scoring and evaluation on a test and research?
Objection, Your Honor. Compound.
Overruled. Good.
Sure. So the PCL and the CAPS-5 are frequently used in research. And when they're used in research, that means the document stands alone. They don't have 88 pages of notes to help understand the background of the trauma and what the person has experienced. And why those boxes may be relevant in research is because back in the day when I was a research assistant, I had to input that into the computer. And then they would maybe look at some of that data for the research study. So that becomes very important in research.
All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hughes. You can have a seat in the courtroom where you're free to go, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take our afternoon recess. Our morning recess. Let's take our 15-minute recess. Do not discuss the case with anybody and don't do any outside research, okay?
Okay, I'm ready now. We got some stuff to talk about. It's gonna be a long day, be a bad time for her. Yeah, she's masked up. Of course she is. Absolutely. I wish she would have kept it on for the testimony. Would have done everybody a favor.
We just come back at 11:05 then?
She should be embarrassed. The person like this is never gonna be embarrassed because they're just a fraud. And that's all they are. And I think everybody kind of realizes that by now, and that's why, see, here's what my opinion is. I think that she is intentionally trying to go and prove herself, like, not wrong and try to, like, put herself out there as, oh, well, this isn't really what I meant, and, like, oh, it was Dr. Curry that was wrong, not me. I didn't do anything wrong. Meanwhile, like, here, let's use a little bit of logic, right? So whenever you ask this person to orient themselves for a certain time frame, does that necessarily mean that they will? Does that mean that that will happen? Well, no, not necessarily. And also, she only did one test. And this is what they said before, is she only did one test. And if she wanted her to orient herself, so what is the logic behind orient yourself? So the logic behind orient yourself is to contextualize the trauma in which the time that it occurred, right? Because that's obviously the idea, that I want you to orient yourself in this time period so we can contextualize what happened to you in this context, right? So how can you possibly reorient somebody whenever there are two causal factors? You would have to have two different orientation points in order to separate these causal factors and determine which causal factor is the reason why the PTSD exists at the certain time that it does. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is obviously, so she's only doing one test, and then after that test, like, I'll be honest, like, I've heard the stories that Amber Heard and her sister have said, and then also people have said about their home life. Seems like it fucking sucked. It really did. And like, I can guarantee you that she probably has some PTSD from that. I mean, abso-fucking-lutely. So it just makes sense. I can only answer questions. And then also on top of that, that she is an expert in domestic violence, or she is an expert in the treating domestic violence. Being an expert in treating domestic violence does not mean that you are an expert in determining who committed that domestic violence or the manner in which it occurred. And the reason why I say that is that you can compare this to any other example. If you are a doctor, that doesn't mean that you are being a doctor does not give you definitive proof that something happened in the way that your patient tells you that it happened. And this is also in the context of, as far as I know, Johnny Depp never even talked to her. So talk away for the 5 community subs. I appreciate that. Like, is that right? Like, he literally never even talked to her. Yeah, so he never talked to her. So there's no context behind the domestic violence. And then also on top of that, there were, what I find to be very weird about this, and I think this is probably the most illuminating thing out of all of these, I don't know, quote, expert witnesses. Why would he? Well, there's no reason for him to, and he made a good decision not doing it, right? Because she's obviously a fraud, who's a sexist, who's just looking to help Amber for a paycheck. Also, let's talk about a little fucking thing here called being a client. Now, am I the only fucking person that saw this whenever she said, what did she fucking say? Let me go back over here. It's the one right before this. Let's go ahead and just scroll back over. Is this it? No, where the hell is it? Give me a second. Let me see if I can find it here. Client ID. So let's go ahead. Wait a second. What was her name? Dawn Hughes, not a client. Let's see if I can get the quote of her saying that. Damn, there's no way I can really see it here. Yeah, I don't know where it is in this video, but I think that we can all just kind of agree, right? That she said very plainly that Amber Heard was not a client. She said this, Garen fucking Dees. Everybody remembers this multiple times, explicitly stated it, especially at the beginning of her testimony, whenever she was trying to present herself as an unbiased witness and not disclosing her previous relationship with Amber Heard. But before that, she said multiple times Amber Heard was not a client, which I'm sure in some technical distinction might be true. However, what about this one right here? How it literally says client ID AH. I wonder what that stands for. I don't know. Like, yeah, it could stand for anything. And so, yeah, you could check someone in chat, be able to find it. It's a standard form. Yeah, this is a standard form, right? And let's see. I'm going to read the rest of this stuff. Everything, you were saying earlier how everything she's saying could be accurate. Well, what I'm saying is that she could have tested Amber Heard for PTSD, and it would have been an accurate diagnosis that Amber Heard had PTSD. There's not a debate as to whether Amber Heard has or does not have PTSD. The debate is whether the PTSD that she does or does not have is an outcome directly from Johnny Depp. And that's what the difference thing. Yeah, it's Amber's hearsay. That's probably, yeah, that's about right. Yeah, stands for Adolf Hitler. Okay. Probably not that far, but do you see kind of what I'm saying? So it had nothing to do initially with whether she had PTSD or not. So her proving that Amber Heard had PTSD actually doesn't prove anything at all, because you're trying to prove the causal link between Johnny Depp and the PTSD that Amber Heard might or might not have. So both of these things are not accurate. And so let's go back over here. I'll read the rest of this. Curry said she's too high. functioning to have PTSD? Well, obviously it exists on a spectrum, but based off of the stories that she's told, it does not make sense that Amber Heard would be able to audition and go to movie premieres and stuff like this if she has so much PTSD. She's like worried about all this like crazy stuff, and like Johnny Depp's like beating the shit out of her and stuff like that. It seems very unlikely. You see what I'm saying? And just got here. Should Depp's lawyer have ended with the questioning? Dr. Hughes, what, if anything, does RTFM? I don't even know what RTFM is. I have no idea. You can't just skip the test and write down got abused. Well, what I don't like about this the most, this is what I particularly don't like, is the fact that she is basically omitting any sort of, like traditional testing or traditional methodology in favor of basically winging it. And I can understand that, right? I mean, you've been doing it for a long time. You think you're so confident of what you're doing. And of course, you're just going to say pretty much whatever you want to say because that's what you think is true. Like, yeah, of course, that's what they do. And what's this here? Yeah, I don't know what RTF. Oh, read the fucking manual. Oh, I forgot. It's been a long time since people have used that. And MA in clinical psychology, witness women very well sexist, but what she did, so it's when a test and tested in court is correct. She didn't skip the test. Even in the context of her skipping the test, I think that she should have used 2 tests to test for Johnny Depp being the outcome of the PTSD. On top of that, I also think that she should have talked to Johnny Depp before rendering a conclusion. It's because, I mean, anybody would say, including her, is that domestic violence cases are extremely complicated. It's not like this is a one side, oh, this person is right, this person is wrong. In many cases, it's a two-way street. So for her to just completely ignore this or not even approach that at all, I think that's very interesting. Yeah, do you see what I'm saying? And she did that because she would disagree? Yeah, of course she would, because it would make her look bad. That's all there is to it. So I find it to be very annoying that she's being presented as a domestic violence expert, as if being an expert on the subject of domestic violence makes you an expert on the perpetrators of domestic violence in specific circumstances in which you do not have the full evidence of, and you have never even interviewed the second party. Like, these are 2 completely different fucking things. And they're trying to put them together in order to make her look like an authority, but she's clearly not. And so, yeah, I have to talk to family and other people, etc. Watches her testimony, knows what she's about. No point in trying to convince the willfully ignorant. Exactly. Yes, I think so. For forensic, you need to ensure that you remove complacency and perform it by the book. I think that's a very good point, is that, yes, she did not perform this by the book, and this is not just an everyday, I'm going to give this person a diagnosis and kind of talk to them about their problems. This is a court case that needs to be addressed in a real way. And as far as I know, I think that she did all of this in the context of knowing that was the case. So I think that's a big factor too. And she gave me PTSD listening to her. I mean, I don't fucking blame you. I don't like her at all. Yeah, I don't like her at all. I think that one thing that this has really shown a lot, though, is that the expert testimony is not really always expert testimony. Is that you can get somebody up there that has 25 fucking years of experience, and they can be a complete moron that has no idea what they're talking about. Or even better, they do know what they're talking about, and they're biased. So they already have an agenda and they already have something that they're going to say. So I think that's what really fucking annoys me the most about this, is that I think that the reason why science works, and the reason why, the scientific method and basically the way that people obtain data and information works, is because you have people that are able to question it. And I think that this is one of the things that a lot of people might forget, is that I think this case has shown that all experts don't agree on a lot of things. And even whenever it's something very simple, like how did somebody cut their hand? You can have one expert come in and say that it's just impossible for this to happen, and another expert to come in and say that it is possible for it to happen. So which one is it? Because either it's possible or it's not, right? These are mutually exclusive. You can't have both of them. But I think that it's very important to keep in mind that just because you are supposedly an expert in something, that doesn't necessarily mean you know what you're talking about. You see what I mean? And just Kevin Spacey charged with 4 counts of sexual assault against 3 men. Well, Kevin Spacey's a piece of shit. Yeah, he's a piece of shit, and that's really all there is to it. I don't have anything else to say. Yeah, he's a piece of shit. It's probably true. Yeah. I don't know what else I can really get into besides that. Scientific experts at one time agreed that the Earth is flat. Yeah, I think so. And I think that one thing that this thing teaches people is that the most important thing is to be able to question things and be able to bring up your own evidence and your own contrary viewpoints. And I think that's extremely important. And also, I find it to be very odd that this, I'm going to go back to the pictures here, because I think the pictures is also quite damning. Because this guy right here, you see these two pictures, okay? You see these two pictures, and they knew the Earth was round in the Greek era. Oh, they did, because a guy measured it with the shadows. But then they went back. Like, there was a reason why they called it the Dark Ages, okay? She basically did it the way she did because she thought everyone didn't know anything about her methods, but it goes to show how far the court will look at minor details to find justice. Yeah, I think so. And what's this here? You can see it, Mr. Photo? No, at a time the scientists did think the Earth was flat. I don't want to argue. It doesn't matter. All I'm saying is that, like, whether that one's not true or not does not really have anything to do with what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I think this is a general state that people are in, where they don't believe things or they do believe things and they won't accept any evidence to the other side. We can't see the left side. There's a watermark there, so you're not able to see it here either. But whenever the watermark was removed, like very temporarily, I don't know if it'll show it here or not. I don't think it will. The watermark showed, or sorry, the lack of it showed that both of these are the exact same photo. It's just like, the amount of intellectual dishonesty somebody would have in order to say that both of these are different photos, in my opinion, would just be like an immediate disqualifier. Yeah, it would be an immediate disqualifier. I would never take them seriously after they said that. That's all it comes down to. And what's this here? There are no impossible things in this world. There are impossible people. Yeah, I think we're looking at one right here. That's certainly the case. How could the forensic data expert even testify the photos are original? It sure as hell wouldn't be allowed in Sweden, but third world country called USA, this is legal. Well, I don't think that he can testify whether they're the originals or not, because he's not able to check. Like, as to a certain extent, I don't even know if you can check to see if certain things are edited. And the other guy before, I think that he said that even. He even said that you can't really check to be 100% sure. All you're doing is basically having different degrees of certainty. And that's all it comes down to. What's strange is that it's actually not cause mutual bond. You testify against each other at circus case. Probably Amber will plead insanity if she uses. No matter the outcome, Hughes should lose her license. Well, that would be a best case scenario. He tried to bypass it, saying it's visually different, meaning it's not different. Yeah, it's a visually different photo. Well, which is like, it's such a deliberately disingenuous thing to say, because if the coding on the photo that causes it to communicate to the operating system to display it with a certain color combination is different with the different photos, then the coding and the data underneath it would be different, because the communication would need to be different as well. So it's just like, if you say it's visually different, that means that it has different coding. It's common sense. Like, and like, you don't need to be a scientific wizard to understand this. Of course, yes, of course. Let me see that here. Evidence is there's beyond a reasonable doubt. Exactly. And I think that this is kind of what it comes down to. And let's see here. Sounds so basic, though. I know it sounds so basic, but people don't fucking understand it. Same photo, different version. Here's what I think happened, okay? I'll go back to the photos, because I think this is the most damning bit of evidence. In my opinion, I think that out of all the things that Amber has submitted and everything on their side, in totality, this is actually one of the most damning bits of evidence. And it's not necessarily because of this thing in itself, it's what this implies. What this implies is that she is willing to misrepresent evidence and present it as if it is not what it is. And the moment that somebody is literally misrepresenting evidence and actually like altering and submitting evidence as if it's different, that's a big fucking deal to me. I think that's a tremendous big deal. And absolutely, she's a psychiatrist, can answer questions. DM me if you want. Well, it's not about that. Like, the psychiatrist thing is just one point of it. I think so. Tweeted the video at a time where she says she's a client. Okay, yeah. Let me see this. I want to make sure everybody's able to see it right here. And give me 1 second. I'll pull this up. And let me go back over here. Not a client, by the way. Okay. 122.44. Let's see if I can find it. 122, 22.44. Let me make sure if that's right. 124.44. Okay, here we go. So let's see. Like, she'll be actually shook right now? No, she probably didn't do nothing like that. Probably just sitting there. But, like, I just... Oh, it's 1 minute. People need to understand. Give me a second.
A forensic psychological evaluation is an evaluation that is conducted for the courts to answer a particular legal question. It contains multiple parts. Ms. Heard is not a client of mine. She's not.
Where's the chart? Where's the chart? Where's we gotta find a chart. Where's the chart? Oh, fuck. I might not be able to get it right here. So, oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. Where is it? Let me see if I can find it real quick. Not a client. Yeah, it's right. It's right before this. Give me 1 second. All right, let's play it again. I want to play it again just so everybody can hear it. Yep. Where is it? Okay.
It contains multiple parts. Ms. Heard is not a client of mine. She's
lying bitch.
In therapy with me.
There it is.
It's my clinical care. It is an objective evaluation.
It's a lying bitch. Like, that's it. That's a lying ass bitch. And like, that's literally all there is to it. Like, I don't understand. Like, I mean, come on, man. She had to use client ID as a reference for the first time we spoke with her for record keeping. It's a different client equals patient. She means client as in paying customer. It's deliberately misleading to the jury. And she knows that, and that's why she's saying it. You see, like, I don't care about the technicalities because I know what the technicalities are used for. Do you see what I'm saying? Whenever somebody uses a technicality to communicate an untruth, or to imply an untruth, I consider that the exact same as lying. I do. I think that it's the exact same. I'm not going to play around with some ring around the rosy, hide the ball bullshit where, oh, that's not really what she meant. Yes, it is. That's what she wanted them to think. And so that's what it is. Yeah, pledge versus donate. It's the same horse shit, man.